6 months after burying my mother, I thought the worst was behind me. Then my husband's emergency contact called me at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. Not me, his wife, but his emergency contact. And when I arrived at Mercy General and pulled back the curtain on Trauma Bay 2, I finally understood why he had never bothered to update that particular form. My best friend of 11 years was sitting beside his bed. She was wearing the dark green wrap dress I had complimented when she bought it last spring. Not scrubs, not whatever you throw on when you get a panicked call. The dress she wore when she was trying to look her best. She had a glass of water from the cafeteria sitting on his bedside table, and her coat was folded neatly over the arm of the visitor's chair, and she looked exactly like someone who had been there long enough to get comfortable. She looked up when I walked in. For exactly 1 second, her face showed something she couldn't control, something wide-eyed and cornered. Then she smoothed it out and managed to smile. "Oh good," she said, "you made it." My husband had been knocked sideways when a rigging cable snapped at his job site, minor lacerations on his left forearm, a bruise along his jaw that was already turning yellow at the edges. The attending physician had already cleared him. He was sitting upright, fully conscious, in no danger whatsoever. He did not ask if I had driven safely through the rain. He did not ask about the roads. He looked at me the way you look at a coworker who shows up uninvited to a party you didn't tell them about. "You didn't have to drive all the way out here," he said. "I'm fine." "You're my husband," I said. "The roads are bad." Amanda was already in the area. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was having dinner nearby when he called. It was nothing." He had called her. His wife had been 45 minutes away on a Tuesday night in November, and my husband had gotten hurt and reached for his phone and dialed my best friend. The attending nurse came in with discharge paperwork. She handed the clipboard to me. I was, legally, his next of kin, and reviewed the care instructions in a carefully neutral voice, the kind nurses develop when they have seen this exact situation too many times. I signed where indicated. My husband talked to my best friend about logistics, about who should drive. They did not ask me. I told him I would pull the car around. I took his personal effects. The hospital had released them to me. Standard procedure. I was his spouse. And I walked to the parking garage. I sat in the driver's seat with his phone in my lap and the engine off and the rain drilling against the concrete overhead. I told myself I wouldn't look. I used the pin that was the same one he'd used for everything since the year we met, our anniversary date. He had never changed it. The text thread with my best friend went back 14 months. She called him babe. She asked about my moods, my schedule, whether I had been weird lately. She sent him photos I will not describe. He wrote about our marriage like a lease he was waiting to let expire, something to be minimized, tolerated until it could be ended cleanly. He described me as exhausting. He described my grief 6 months ago when my mother was dying as inconvenient timing. I scrolled past months of it. Then I found the exchange that made my hands stop shaking entirely. The estate account cleared. $200K plus whatever's left from the house. Are you sure she can't see the statements? Him, I'm the executor. I control everything. She doesn't even open the mail anymore. She's been a mess since the funeral. Her and the property. Him, the deed transfer takes time when you're being careful, but it'll be done before she figures anything out. She's too sad to pay attention. I sat in that parking garage for 9 minutes. Then I reached into my bag and took out my work laptop. I am a certified fraud examiner. I have worked in the Financial Crimes Division at First Harbor Bank for 8 years. I investigate hidden accounts, forged documents, and money that disappears through legitimate-looking channels. My husband had sat across from me at dinner parties for years while I explained what I do, and he had called it glorified spreadsheet work, and he had laughed and I had let him. He had absolutely no idea what glorified spreadsheet work actually looks like. I connected to the bank's secure network and pulled the estate account records. My mother had spent 31 years maintaining a $200,000 life insurance policy. She had named me as her sole beneficiary on the policy, and on the deed to the house she had bought the year before I was born. When she died, my husband had offered to serve as estate executor, so patiently, so generously, telling me I was too emotional to handle the paperwork, that he would take care of everything. I had been grateful. I had thanked him. I had handed over the notarized documents and gone back to bed. Over the 9 months since my mother's funeral, he had categorized $183,000 in estate account withdrawals as administration expenses. No itemization, no receipts filed with the probate court, no documentation of any kind. The remainder had been swept 3 weeks ago into a joint personal account I had never seen before. Not our joint marital account, but a second account registered to both his name and hers. I pulled the county recorder's database next. The deed on my mother's house, the property I had legally inherited, the house I had grown up in, had been transferred via quit-claim deed 4 months ago to a Delaware LLC. I ran the notary license number on the stamp. The license had expired in 2021. The deed was forged. I opened the Federal Registry and ran the LLC name. The registered agent address, the address on every piece of incorporation paperwork, was my mother's house. He had used my dead mother's home address as the legal foundation for the shell company he used to steal from her estate. I closed the laptop. I went back inside the hospital and told my husband I wasn't feeling well, that I thought he should take a rideshare. He seemed relieved. My best friend offered to drive him. Neither of them looked at me as I walked back out through the sliding glass doors. I drove home in the rain. I sat in my driveway for a while. I went inside and cried for about 5 minutes, and then I called Carmen. Carmen handles in-house legal work at First Harbor Bank. Her office is 2 doors from mine, and she has been my closest colleague for 6 years, and she makes genuinely terrible coffee. She answered on the second ring, and I told her everything without stopping. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Don't move any money," she said. "Don't contact him. Don't send anything from your personal accounts. Be at my office at 7. I was there at 6:45. We worked through everything I had found. Carmen pulled the forged deed independently and confirmed the expired notary stamp. She also surfaced something I had missed. The LLC had opened a business checking account at another institution, and that account had received wire transfers from multiple external sources over 2 years. She turned her screen toward me. "Do any of these look familiar?" I looked at the source account numbers and felt the specific cold recognition of something I should have seen a long time ago. My husband's construction company carries business insurance through a carrier that processes claims through First Harbor Bank. 6 months ago, I had been assigned to audit a batch of commercial property damage claims and had flagged 3 as suspicious, escalating them for review before a staffing change stalled the process. The business name on the policy was different, a DBA I had never heard, but the job site addresses on the claims matched locations I recognized from the project calendar on our kitchen refrigerator. I had been investigating my own husband for 6 months without knowing it was him. "Carmen," I said. "I see it," she said. "How many total claims?" She counted 14, 22 months. I ran the numbers, $347,000, from a federally insured institution. She set down her coffee. "Federal jurisdiction, then." He served me with divorce papers that Thursday morning. I was at my regular coffee shop, at my regular table, when a man in a wrinkled blazer walked directly toward me and dropped a manila envelope in front of my cup with enough force to splash it. "You've been served," he said loudly. The woman at the next table looked up. I opened the envelope and read every page without putting it down. My husband was filing on the grounds of emotional abandonment. He claimed my grief following my mother's death had made me psychologically unavailable as a partner. He was seeking sole ownership of our marital home, citing himself as the primary financial contributor. He was requesting $3,500 per month in spousal support. His mother had submitted a notarized affidavit attesting to my erratic and unstable behavior since the funeral, stating she feared for my well-being. His mother, who had called to check on me exactly once in the 9 months since my mother died, and only then because she had dialed the wrong contact. I folded the papers, put them back in the envelope, finished my tea, and called Carmen. "He filed," I said. "I know, his attorney copied us an hour ago." A brief pause. "Are you ready?" Carmen had drafted a settlement agreement. From the outside, it read as total surrender. I was conceding the marital home, waiving any claim to the estate account, agreeing not to make public statements about either of them. On its face, it was everything he wanted, packaged cleanly and handed over without a fight. On page 6, buried inside 4 paragraphs of indemnification language, was a clause in which my husband confirmed, under penalty of perjury, that he had served as the sole decision-making executor of my mother's estate, that all financial actions taken through the estate account had been made at his exclusive direction, and that I had no knowledge of or involvement in any estate transactions whatsoever. He would be signing a federal confession. Also on page 6, a clause permanently waiving any future claim to properties tied to the estate, including the childhood home. We needed him to sign without reading it carefully, which meant we needed him to believe he had already won. I sent a text to a woman named Deb, a mutual acquaintance I knew reported everything back to my best friend within the hour. I made the text sound fractured and exhausted. I said I didn't know how much longer I could do this. I said maybe he should just have the house, I couldn't keep fighting. I said I was scared. Carmen called his attorney that afternoon to say her client was prepared to settle on his terms. He signed 2 days later. His attorney tried to slow him down. Carmen told me afterward she could hear them arguing in the hallway, my husband saying he didn't need another week, he didn't need to read the whole thing, he had somewhere to be at 2 o'clock. He initialed page 6 without pausing. Carmen filed the criminal referral with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit that same afternoon. There was still one thing I needed to do myself. My best friend had moved into my mother's house 2 months earlier. She had painted the kitchen a color my mother would have hated. She had replaced my mother's curtains, yellow cotton ones she had sewn herself the summer I turned 12, with linen panels in a neutral gray. She was hosting a housewarming party that Saturday, and I found out because she had sent the invitation to a group text that included 6 of my friends from college. She had not removed me from the thread. It had apparently not occurred to her that I might still be in it. I arrived 40 minutes into the party. The house was full. I recognized my mother's neighbor from down the block, standing near the fireplace with a glass of wine. I recognized my college roommate, who saw me walk in and went so still she looked like a photograph of herself. My best friend was at the center of the room in a white dress, talking about subway tile, looking like a woman who had built something from the ground up. My husband was beside her, hand at her waist, wearing the expression of a man who had won. The room went quiet in a wave, starting at the front and moving back. Carmen was 2 steps behind me, carrying a leather portfolio. My best friend's face went through something complicated. Then she landed on a version of composure that didn't quite fit right. Jenna, this isn't, you shouldn't be here. Actually, I said, this is my house, so technically all of you are the ones who shouldn't be here. I looked around the room, at the new paint, the gray curtains, the rearranged furniture, all the ways she had tried to overwrite a life that didn't belong to her. But I'll give everyone a few minutes to finish their drinks. My husband stepped forward. You need to leave right now. I really don't. Carmen was already at the fireplace, setting a document on the mantel where the room could see it. This is the certified deed for this property, Carmen said, her voice carrying cleanly across the room, filed with the county recorder's office and verified 2 days ago. The sole legal owner is Jenna. The deed transfer your husband used to place this property in an LLC was executed with a notary stamp that expired in 2021. The document was forged. Under state law, a fraudulent conveyance is void from inception. The property reverted to the legal heir. My husband's face moved through confusion, then certainty, then a white and sudden terror. That's not, he started. He also signed a settlement agreement on Friday morning, I said. In that document, he confirmed under penalty of perjury that he was the sole executor of my mother's estate and that all financial decisions were made at his exclusive direction. He confirmed I had no knowledge of any estate transactions. I watched his face, which is a notarized confession to embezzling $183,000 from a deceased woman's estate, my mother's estate. Someone near the back of the room put their wine glass down very slowly. There is also the matter of 14 fraudulent commercial insurance claims filed over 22 months, totaling $347,000, processed through a federally insured institution. I looked at my best friend. $47,000 of that money was wired directly to her. She opened her mouth, nothing came out. The front door opened. 2 FBI agents in dark jackets came in from the porch. One of them said my husband's name in the particular flat tone that means there is no version of this conversation where you walk away. He didn't run. He just stood there in my mother's repainted kitchen, and I watched 9 years of carefully constructed performance collapse into something that had never been real underneath. They brought him out through the front door past the people he had invited to celebrate. My best friend sat down on my mother's couch, the one I had fallen asleep on during thunderstorms as a child, and pressed both hands over her face. His mother, who had been standing in the kitchen doorway, turned toward me with an expression cycling rapidly from fury to calculation to something much quieter and much more frightened. "Jenna," she started. "You submitted a perjured affidavit to a county court," Carmen said pleasantly. "I'd strongly recommend calling an attorney before Monday." I looked around the room one more time, at the neutral gray curtains, at the subway tile she had picked, at all the small, deliberate ways she had tried to move in and make herself permanent. "I'll be in touch about collecting your things," I said, to no one in particular. I walked out through the front door and stood on the porch in the cold November air, and I breathed. Just breathed. The way you breathe when something that has been sitting on your chest for months finally lifts. It took just over 3 months for everything to settle. My husband pleaded guilty to federal bank fraud and estate embezzlement. His sentencing guidelines put him at 4 to 6 years. He agreed to full cooperation and full restitution, which meant every account, every transaction record, and every document he had ever signed became the property of the federal government. My best friend accepted a plea agreement, 2 years probation, mandatory restitution of $47,000, and a felony record that will follow her for the rest of her life. She sent me a letter from her parents' house, where she moved after she had to vacate my mother's property. I read the first paragraph. It was mostly about her. His mother's civil liability was settled out of court by her attorney. My mother's curtains are back up. I found them folded in a plastic storage bin in the garage, where they'd been put away when the gray linen went up. I hung them myself on a Sunday afternoon, standing on the old wooden step stool my mother kept by the back door, and when the afternoon light came through the yellow cotton the way it used to on winter weekends, I had to hold on to the windowsill for a moment and just stay there. Then I climbed down, put the step stool back in its place, and made a pot of tea. Carmen and I are still 2 doors apart at the office. Her coffee is still terrible. But on Friday afternoons now, we leave an hour early and sit in this kitchen, at this table, going through the business plan for the consulting firm we are launching together. Fraud examination and legal strategy, with our first 3 corporate clients already signed. The name was her idea. I liked it immediately. My husband used to introduce me at parties as his wife who worked in banking. He never said what I actually did. I think he genuinely didn't know or didn't want to know, because knowing would have required him to take it seriously. He found out. It just took a little longer than it should have. My mother was a quiet woman who believed absolutely and without sentimentality that the most powerful thing you could be was competent. Not loud, not flashy, just devastatingly, precisely good at what you do, and patient enough to wait for the moment that matters. I learned it from her. I just didn't know how well I'd learned it until I needed it most.